The sanctuary of the clans, reduced to ruin. Beyond these walls lay the pillars of Nosgoth, the seat of Kain's empire. How humble it now appeared, collapsing into the dust of its former magnificence. And yet, I had only just emerged. In the instant between my execution and resurrection, centuries had apparently passed.
This world is wrecked with cataclysms. The earth strains to shrug off the pestilence of Kain's parasitic empire. The fate of this world was preordained in an instant by a solitary man. Unwilling to martyr himself to restore Nosgoth's balance, Kain condemned the world to the decay you see. In that moment, the unraveling began. Now it is nearly played out. Nosgoth teeters on the brink of collapse. Its fragile balance cannot hold.
Things have in fact changed a lot more than Raziel had suspected. It wasn't any short period of time that had passed since Raziel had been killed. In fact, has been 1,000 years. Raziel wasn't even alive for 1,000 years prior to that. And he, well, things have gone really bad.
The doors of the sanctuary were immovable, either barred from the inside or rusted shut. I would need to find another means of entry.
And as proud as the vampire dynasty was that Kain had set up, and as much as Raziel, even at this point, thinks fondly of it, things have changed quite a bit. You can kill these guys like that. You have to impale them. You got to make sure you take their souls before you pick your weapon back up, because if you don't, hold on. Watch this. And it's alive again. So, I gotta kill it again. Whoops. Controls are a little different than I was testing it out on. So if you suck out their souls before, then their bodies disappear and you don't have to worry about it. But things have really gone to shit in this area. The empire that Kain had set up has completely fallen apart. And the vampires that basically ruled over the world had allowed everything to fall to complete garbage. The sky is polluted, which is probably an intentional thing, and the mighty gates in this temple that they had set up. I mean, Raziel didn't even know if the gates were barred or simply rusted shut. Everything has fallen to ruin. And this mysterious benefactor of Raziel has mentioned that the world has struggled ever since Kain had refused to martyr himself at the end of Blood Omen. And if you remember from the first Legacy of Kain game, it was called the Blood Omen series back then, there was a choice you had to make at the very end of the game. Do you martyr yourself, bring an end to your own life in order to restore the balance and restore the pillars of Nosgoth in order to make sure that the pillars get purified, and whatever purposes they served, they continue to do so because they had been cursed by a sorcerer named Nuprector, who had, after his wife had been murdered, went insane. Kain was one of the Pillar Guardians, so it was after he had killed all of the other Pillar Guardians and purified their pillars, he had to do the same to himself. He had to bring an end to his own life, or the pillars would never have been purified completely. The proper choice for you to make in that game was to not restore the pillars, to allow yourself to continue living and basically become a god in this decrepit world. The pillars collapsed. Kain became what he decided at that point that he wanted to be, to continue to be a vampire, to continue to be cursed, and the world is paying for that choice.
This, at least, had remained constant. the endlessly swirling vortex of the abyss, my tomb, and the womb of my rebirth. Though much of Nosgoth's landscape had changed, these cliffs gave me my bearings. My clan territory was to the west. I was anxious to see how my descendants had fared during the centuries of my absence.
In order to run his empire after he had basically chosen to continue living, and he was the last vampire alive at that point, since Mobius's crusade against the vampires commenced after Kain had mistakenly traveled to the past in order to kill an insane king when he was younger, named William the Just. That resulted in a change in history in which everybody in the world essentially turned against the vampires and killed off all the other ones, and Kain was basically left the only one alive. Of course, that's part of the changed history, and a lot of the ideas about multiple paths in history and multiple timelines has added a lot of confusion to the story of the Legacy of Kain series. But after Kain did that, he ended up becoming the only vampire still left alive. Being the only vampire left alive meant that it was up to him to sort of, if the vampires were going to continue to exist, he had to be the one to basically reestablish vampires as a species. Now, something that will be established later on is that vampires, although they sort of have an ability to traditionally pass on the vampire curse on to other people, younger vampires really don't have that ability. It's something that they have to... It's never really specified exactly what that power is, or what that ability entails, what the process is, or anything like that. This one's not dead, but I'm not going to pull the spike out of it. I'm just going to take this other weapon. It's never really detailed exactly what that process is of turning a person into a vampire, but the way Kain had did it with his lieutenants, like Raziel and the others that were standing around Kain's throne room in the beginning cinematic of the game, is very much a different process. But Kain raised all of his vampire lieutenants and then slowly used them to start building his army, and eventually conquered the humans and took over the world.
Utter desolation. My once proud kin wiped from this world like excrement from a boot. I knew the hand that wrought this deed.
Each of Kain's vampire lieutenants had their own clans in which they were direct control over. All, of course, yielding to Kain, who was the one that was ultimately in control of all of them. After Raziel was executed as being a traitor, which I guess in the vampires' minds was actually the case, he went and the rest of Raziel's clan were executed as well, hunted down and killed, although the details of that situation is never really detailed. This will lead to another warp point, so I'm not going to go in there right now. No reason to. There we go. I was trying to pick the weapon up. But Raziel seems to have come to the conclusion at this point that they are all killed. Now, these vampires that we've been running into so far are not Raziel's kin. Now, I think it's like a interesting and reoccurring concept that the heroes of these games, well, it's difficult to call them heroes. Kain is definitely not a hero. That the different protagonists in these games are people who find the situations that are in like a very unwelcome situation. For example, when Kain was first turned into a vampire back in Blood Omen, he referred to it as a curse. It was something that he wanted to get rid of. He did it only so he can get revenge on the people who had murdered him, but once that job was done, he did not want to continue being a vampire, and he basically went through the entire journey in the attempt to rid himself of the curse, which probably wasn't even possible. But he was promised a cure, or promised release from it, and little did he know that that release actually meant his own death. And that was the release that he refused. Hey, it's a dead guy. That release was refused. That's why Kain continued to survive. Didn't want to end his own life to support humans, something that he had at that point had considered himself to be beyond and above. But here we are in another situation that's kind of similar to that. Raziel is a wraith at this point, sort of a spectral wraith, Soul Reaver, the Elder God had referred to him as. And it's something that he's obviously not particularly fond of, a status that he doesn't want. He'd rather be in his old vampire form, but he's sort of disgusted at what he's seen has become of both the world around him and what the vampires have mutated into. They are not things that he would have chosen. So, it's sort of this weird choice between, not really a choice, but two different situations. If he had stayed a vampire, he would have turned into one of these hideous monsters by this point. In fact, he had already mutated quite significantly by the time he was killed, turning into this weird three-fingered creature with wings and all that. But nowhere near mutated as much as like this creature is. This vampire who doesn't look very much human anymore. But it was either that or turn into this spectral wraith form, something that is horribly mutilated. His body looks like he's desiccated. His jaw is missing and all that kind of stuff. It was really nasty looking. Ah, you son of a bitch, jumping out of nowhere. I'm gonna kill ya. How do you like that? But even still, he's referring to his once proud vampire race with quite a degree of pride. Now the Elder God, the voice, this mysterious benefactor who seems to be trying to help Raziel along, has referred to the wheel of fate not being allowed to turn, the souls not returning to it. And that has something to do with, you know what, actually I want to end this episode here. I'm reaching a point that I don't want to continue on with, plus we're about 13-14 minutes in, so I'll mention this in the next episode that I'll make in a few seconds. So if you want to hear what I have to say, you have to wait like 4 days. Sorry.